Now, I'm joined by Dr. Duncan Robertson, who's policy and strategy analyst, academic from Loughborough University, who focuses on COVID-19 modelling and analysis. Dr. Robertson, thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
So tell us about your view on this.
Well, I think, we're in a pretty precarious situation at the moment. And, obviously cases are very high and that's putting a tremendous pressure on the health service. So we need to do something. And the most important thing is to get the number of cases down and down very quickly. So, there's been some sort of, trial balloons and leaked documents talking about these £500 incentives to isolate. But I think, all of these things have to be looked as a whole system of interventions. And I think what, perhaps we've been doing up until now is looking at incremental interventions rather than looking at the entire system.
Now, we understand that there are European governments, Germany and others, that offer quite substantial benefits that allow people to stay at home so they can self-isolate. And it's true, isn't it, that if people don't self-isolate, if they go out to work, they spread the virus. And so there's got to be an incentive for people to actually do it. And you can't have a situation where people are worrying about staying at home.
No, exactly. And nobody's sort of going out and deliberately trying to spread the virus because that doesn't benefit anybody. So the point is people aren't isolating because of many reasons. I mean, the most obvious one is because they're going to lose money. And, we already have a scheme in place where you can claim this £500, but of course not everybody after they claim gets it. So I think this is really why.
I understand that scheme's slightly pathetic because, in fact, it's administered by local authorities. It's not been publicised. And even when they do apply, almost 75% of people are not being awarded the money. So it's a pretty thin scheme, and which is why there's this story about overhauling it and making it way more substantial and a lot easier. Is that right?
Well, I know as much as you do, and of course, as I say, all of these things are, aren't really policy yet. And I think what people need to think is it's the whole thing. So the behavioural group that feeds into SAGE talk about, there isn't just one, there's not one magic bullet. So it's not as though if you pay 500 people, that's going to solve the problem. Because essentially, there are several things. Because, of course, it's not just when you get a positive test you are potentially infectious. Of course, it's when you get the symptoms. Are you going to self-isolate then? And what happens if you come back with a negative test after self-isolating?
That's right.
So the other thing, of course, is, you might pay people, but does it cover all of their losses? And particularly, does it mean that you've still got job security? Because, of course, you might be paid for that 10 days' wages. But if your employer thinks, well, this person's unreliable, then, of course, that's, an added disincentive over and above the monetary one as well. And of course, some additional things, for example, just technical kind of pretty practical things like supermarket deliveries. It's great if you can get a supermarket delivery, but what happens if you can't? People walking dogs and very simple things, that are going to move people from actually complying or self-isolating to think, well, I'm getting a bit hungry now. I've got to, go and get some shopping or to walk the dog. So, it's not a single thing. And I think people, the government, when they set policy, they need to think about the whole system. And I think what we've had up until now is we've had, I suppose, individual government departments thinking about what's their plan. So, the Treasury has had Eat Out to help out. Department of Health and Social Care has had Test and Trace. And, Department of Education, they want to get children in school. So, of course, they're increasing the number of key workers. So, for example, university and college lecturers now classified as critical workers. And, I think we'd like to think we are, but some are more critical than others. So I think it's about the whole system. And, of course, the government does have SAGE with not only the modelling people, but also the behavioural people, SPI-B, who are feeding and who are thinking about this whole system. And I think, with any sort of intervention that comes in, you don't necessarily think about the consequences. You think about the unintended consequences, about what's going to happen and what could happen. And I think it's that sort of joined up systematic thinking.
I've just got one more question. I mean, some are saying that this can incentivise people basically to get the virus, deliberately to get a payment and not go to work. Is that, you study behaviour, is that likely?
Well, the point is, it's about thinking through what are the unintended consequences, and things have happened in the past. There's this thing called the Cobra effect, which is a bit, was 100 years ago. But in India, there's a story where people were paid a bounty for catching cobras, because cobras are bad, and you essentially want to get them out of the people from being bitten. So there's a bounty that was set up for people to catch cobras, and of course entrepreneurs come along and think, well, actually we're going to set up a cobra breeding farm, and of course people breed. And of course, what happens is, the government eventually got wind of it. They and then, of course, all these cobras were access to a requirement, and then went and basically made the situation worse. So, it's an example, but it's thinking that actually putting in an intervention can have these unintended consequences, which make it worse.
Dr. Duncan Robertson, Policy and Strategic Analyst, academic from Loughborough University. Thank you so much for joining us.